All right, we're back. I'm not gonna lie to you. When I just watching that intro and some of those clips, they're from my own personal collection. Some of those clips are from, you guys know this about me. I love to hike. Spend a lifetime, almost a lifetime. Started hiking when I was 18, but that was like 30 years ago, 40 years ago. I love the Rockies, love the mountains, crave them. And when I see that video intro, it makes me think about the fact that hiking season is just around the corner, thankfully. In fact, what's today? Today's the 19th, which means we got what? One more day of this miserable winter, and then we can finally enter spring. Let's see. Let's hope for a good spring. Lots to talk about this week. What an interesting week, right? This is something like I said, I totally look forward to this show. It is your show. Somebody just asked me this right now. They said, "Are you prepared for the show?" And I'm like, I do prepare for the show. I take I'm online most days, and I'm looking at headlines and what the stories are. But when somebody said, "Are you prepared for the show?" I'm like, I don't need to really prepare because it's up to you guys, right? It's what you want to talk about and what you call in, and then that's the topic for the day. But that said, there have been some interesting topics this week. The headline right now, the one I'm most fascinated about, is I do want to talk about the state of the economy and some of the reports that have been coming out because the year ends on December 31st, but it takes like several months for all the data to come in, and so finally Stats Canada starts to release a lot of data in February, March that reflects how 2025 was. And so for me, one of the most interesting parts of that for 2025 was the fact that Canada's population went down, and not a lot. It went down about 100,000 people year over year. We've had three quarters in a row of decreasing population, but a full year over year. So on December 31st, the population of Canada, December 31st, 2025, was less than it was in 2024. And that's after a couple of years following COVID of increased growth. But significantly, it's the first time our population has gone down ever, 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 ever. We've never recorded a year over year population decrease. So why is that? And well, when you dig into the numbers, there's one real fundamental reason, and that is that Ottawa has basically stopped issuing temporary work visas and temporary student visas. And it's the student visa category that's really making up that 100,000 people difference. So people who were here on all sorts of visas, the visas didn't get renewed, and those people are going back to their home countries. And personally, I think that's good news. I mean, I would like to, I'm not happy with the Canada at 40 million people. I prefer the Canada we had at 35 million. But I also think that, not think, I know that the increase in population in the last couple of years was it was a liberal attempt to solve a problem that is a bigger problem. We have a really, really big problem in this country, and that is that our productivity has gone down. We were fundamentally a resource extraction nation. And then somewhere along the way, we decided that we needed to diversify away into other industries like finance and banking and services and the movie industries and other things like that. We tried to diversify, but we diversified into industries that are not really productive. And consequently, our GDP was suffering. But while we were becoming less productive, we continue to lavish ourselves some really nice benefits. We've been doing that since the 1960s, right? So it's great to have a Canada pension plan, old age security, child tax support, cheaper education, healthcare, all those things. But we are at the point where we really can't afford those things, and we keep paying for those things by debt, by borrowing a lot of money. So Canada is famous for borrowing a lot of money. In fact, we're one of the most resource blessed nations on earth, but we borrow and borrow and borrow, and the debt load of our government and individual citizens is like top of the chart worldwide. I mean, there's hardly a nation on earth and a people on earth more indebted than us. So we're fundamentally living beyond our means. We're giving ourselves things we can't really afford. And then we have this compounding problem that our cost of living is going up, and we are taxed to death, and we're not having children, and our population is decreasing naturally. By naturally, I mean that the number of people born versus the number of people dying is less or more. And so the liberals thought that they could solve part of that problem by importing a lot of people. And when you bring in a lot of people, sure, in principle, those people are going to come here and they're going to work. They're going to start industries, start jobs, start businesses. But that didn't happen. And so the people we brought them in too rapidly. They were unproductive, and they created other problems, such as those people need to be housed, and our housing didn't keep up with that. So, and I'm pretty sure most of you folks know all of that. But so this is a the decrease in population is a reversal of one of the worst policies that the government of Canada has implemented in the last couple of years, which was this out of control immigration. And now we're going to see things are going to get a little bit worse for the short term, right? We got all these problems that this out of control immigration caused, like the housing bubble and stuff like that, and inflation are here to stay with us. So we have, this week we saw the Bank of Canada again announce that inflation's 1.8%. They're happy with it. They're trying to claim that it's in their target range. Their target range is 1 to 3%. So their target inflation is 2. So 1.8 is okay. But inflation's not coming down because of things that the government is doing. Inflation's simply coming down because Canadians have no more discretionary income. I mean, for every, if you earn $100,000, you're paying $50,000 in taxes, and then you're paying your mortgage and your utilities and everything else, and you're left with hardly anything. So people are not going on vacation. They're not buying new shoes. They're putting off changing the tires on their car and all those things. And consequently, it appears that inflation is coming down, but that's just the supply and demand side balancing itself out. And so we got these, we got this long-term problem. I mean, inflation's high. And then this week, yesterday, Tiff Macklin, the governor of the Bank of Canada, decided to keep interest rate at 2.25%. And that's good and that's bad news. I mean, it's good news if you're thinking of renewing your mortgage, but fundamentally for the economy with inflation as hot as it is, what the bank would normally do is increase that interest rate and take out some of the money supply in the economy, and then hopefully the inflation comes down. But Tiff is between a rock and a hard place. He's been that way for about a decade now. The relationship between the Bank of Canada and the government is supposed to be an arm's length relationship, but they're supposed to help each other and work cooperatively. And Tiff is trying to control the economy, but he needs help from the government. And then the fundamental help that he needs from the government is for the government to stop this reckless, out of control spending. And there's no end to that in sight. So I wanted to talk about that. It's a big problem that to me, all our governments of the last decade, in fact, further back, even Harper, I think failed to address the fundamental problem of Canada, which is we are an unproductive society at this point. We got way too many people working for the government and sectors that don't really contribute to the economy. All right, we got a caller on the line. Just a reminder, so we don't have a switchboard, so please call. Ask your question. Sometimes if I'm not sounding rude, I hope I don't sound rude if I say, thanks for the question and please hang up. The reason I say please hang up is that way somebody else can call in, because we don't have a switchboard per se. And if you don't call in, you can't see it right now, but the producers put a tablet on my desk. So if I'm looking down once in a while, it's because I'm looking at my tablet, because some questions can come in on the tablet. All right, caller on the line. Name, please. Where are you calling from and what's on your mind?
Hi, Marty. Such a pleasure. This is Sonia from Redmonton, and there are still a few of us good ones living in the den of vipers here. I have a comment and a couple questions.
Go for it.
Okay, so first off, I just want to say how much I appreciate what you do, especially for all the independent stuff and keeping us in the know. It's just pretty awesome. And I also want to thank you for articulating that why I don't give a shit about Canada. And it just kind of sunk in when you kind of said that, it's kind of the system and we just can't get past that. And it's not for our benefit. Anytime a politician comes from the West, they get Ontario washed as soon as they kind of leave the borders. But anyway, just like I said, just thanks for everything. And my first question is about the Alberta referendum vote. Is there any way to limit the votes to a maximum of 3 questions? The first question, of course, independence. The second one, perhaps the time change, because that's really annoying. And then the third one, maybe a pension, but we don't even need that one because Smith, she can change it all. She doesn't even have to put that on. And my big fear is that they're going to water down the independence vote so that it can be challenged in court because it wasn't clear because of all these other bullshit questions that they put on there. So I'm drafting a letter now, but what is it that we can kind of do with that? And my second question is, has anything become of that crazy old batshit lady that attacked you? I'm betting the RCMP dropped it. So, yeah, I was just wondering if anything came of any of these harassments.
Yeah, great question. So thanks. I'll ask you to hang up and I'll answer all your questions and your comments. So first to your comment, yes, I do make fun of thanks. Yeah, you mentioned it. It's Redmonton. I make fun of Edmonton. I feel bad when I make fun of Edmonton because I know some of my best friends live in Edmonton. I'm from Northern Alberta and I used to hang out in Edmonton. I have a kid who lives there. So take it all with a grain of salt. I love people and I recognize that there are some great people in Edmonton, but you got to admit with me that generally speaking, Edmonton is pretty left-leaning, I guess, because I think one of the fundamental reasons it's a government town and an academic town. To the referendum question, I think we talked a little bit about this last week. Personally, I don't know what we can do. I think there should only be one question on the referendum in October, and that's either the APP's question or a variation thereof, because there are 2 groups that want a discussion on independence. Thomas Lukaszik's group raised 400,000 signatures, and I think our group will raise 400,000 or 500,000 signatures. So 1 million Albertans want to talk about independence in one way or another. So I think that should be the only question. Everything else can either be addressed directly through legislation, because I think Danielle has the mandate to do that. And anything where Danielle is contemplating opening the Constitution, that's nonsense and shouldn't be on there. Is there something we can do? No, there isn't. I mean, they're moving the goalpost. Danielle has a mandate, and she told us that if we want a referendum question, the citizens should request it. And I agree. I think a referendum should only come from the citizens. It should never be proposed by the government. So I think she's breaking her own rule by doing that. And I think she should stick to what, the initial plan, which is citizens' initiatives are where referendums come from. In fact, she gave a great example last week, right? Somebody talked about should Alberta have a sales tax or something like that? And Danielle literally turned and said, if Albertans want a sales tax, then they should petition the government. So I think she's breaking her own rules there, and that's the short answer to that. Is there's nothing we can do except to keep pleading with her that we only want one question. I don't have an update on the crazy lady. I'm not gonna, I filed my report. I didn't file a report. I filed a statement. I didn't lay a charge or anything like that. I simply filed a statement of what happened, and then my statement was taken by Stay Free Alberta, and they did what they want with it. As far as I know, that lady, the cops chased her down the highway after she left us, and they turned on the sirens. And talking to people, once the sirens are turned off, you're going to get charged with something, either a road violation of some sort. So, but I don't know what happened. Coincidentally, I'm not canvassing on the side of the road today because I'm here. But I got a group of volunteers now that sit where we normally sit, and one of them sent me 2 really unusual pictures. So, maybe we're getting a little bit paranoid, but you can never be too safe these days. So one of the guys who's canvassing at my spot sent me 2 pictures of 2 unusual vans parked within about 500 yards And his words are, they have eyes on us. So that kind of means that he's under the impression that somebody is sitting in a van just looking at us. We're under scrutiny. By the way, this is an interesting, maybe a good segue for this. I was going to talk a little bit about this. John, can you bring up the National Post headline? This was in the National Post yesterday, and I don't read the whole story. I don't care because I'm not a subscriber. But right there it says Canadians open the negotiation with Western separatists as data shows underrepresentation in Parliament. My God. And look at the line underneath there. Recent data shows Alberta remains underrepresented in the House of Commons. We, on a per capita basis, folks, three things about this article. First of all, it shows that perhaps internal polling in Ottawa and other places are showing that the movement is maybe a little bit bigger, because now we're seeing these kinds of pieces, right? There's always kind of like the 5 stages of grief kind of thing, of this 5, at first they said the movement was fringe, then they attacked us, and then they mocked us, and now maybe they're starting to realize, oh, there is some truth to that. So the fact that there's pieces like this coming out saying Ottawa is perhaps interested in some conversation shows that their internal polling proves that the movement is big. But the funny part was, whoever did that article, like, come on, do your research, man. We've been underrepresented in the House of Commons since 1905, like by design, right? Alberta has like 37 seats. No, not Alberta. Yeah. Anyways, the number of seats we have, and Saskatchewan, the last 2 provinces, compared to our population, compared to Ontario and Quebec, we're completely underrepresented. But even if we were properly represented, it still doesn't matter, because we're outnumbered. Ontario and Quebec outnumber us like 3-4 to 1. So we'll never get our way. Interesting article. Just shows that we're hitting on some spots there. I just staying on the topic, I did some math this weekend. I finally got my hands on the statistics for our little riding, and I know in our riding we collected just over 4,600 signatures so far. That's between 120 people. If you do the math, if our riding is typical of all the other ridings in Alberta, there's 87 ridings. If all 87 ridings got 4,000 signatures, that's 320,000 signatures plus 350. So I think we're already in the 500 range, 400 to 500 range. The weather outside's absolutely gorgeous. This is all I wore coming out here today. So I think we're going to see a big push on petitions going forward this weekend. All right, folks, don't be shy. Like I said, hit that line and give me a buzz. I'm trying to go through the comments here. See, I'm just going to pick a couple out here. Alberta. Whoops. How did that work? Alberta's population is estimated to be over 5 million as of 2025, specifically Statistics Canada. Yeah. Boy, like the Alberta that I came to when, okay, John, sorry. How do I remove? Okay, it does itself. It removes. Yeah. Full disclosure, right? You guys know this. I'm not an Albertan by birth. I was born in Ontario, but I came here looking for work. Came here as a student with a temporary work term in 1988 was the first time. Then I came a second time a little bit later to work. So I'm living in Ontario. At the time, I was naively, when I was younger, I thought I might go into the pulp and paper industry, or perhaps the auto industry like everybody else does in that province. But while I was in school, I was open to the idea of exploring my options. And I went to a school where there were what we did. I did a co-op program, it's called. So employers would come on campus and try and recruit. And I'm looking at these job postings in like Slave Lake and places like that, and none of my buddies would apply. And so I thought, what the heck, I'll apply. Ended up in a small town, Alberta, loved it, and finished my studies, and then came here permanently. So I wasn't born here, but I married a 5th generation gal from here, and I have 4 adult children that were born here. So I'd say I'm pretty much as Albertan as they get. Been here more than half of my life, and I do miss the Alberta of when I was younger, of the late 80s and early 90s. The Alberta that had about 2.5 million people. The Alberta where I could go golfing anytime I wanted to without having to book a tea time. Curling was fun. Restaurants didn't need reservations. Camping permits, that didn't exist. You just showed up in the parks and you went camping pretty much anywhere you wanted. And fishing, everything. I just missed those days. I am of the opinion, I do not believe in growth for the sake of growth, whether it's a business or whether it's the size of a country or anything. I think Canada should try and find that comfortable spot that, maybe it's 30, 40 million people, and then just try and sustain ourselves, stay at that level. And if at any time the benefits we give ourselves are become too expensive, and we feel that the solution is not to bring in more people, I think the solution at that point is to either find efficiencies or maybe cut back the benefits. I know that's not a popular thing, but we do it in the real world, right? At home, if I can't afford if I can't afford one trip to Mexico in the winter, then I don't go to Mexico. I don't keep piling it on my credit card. And I don't know why we accept that from our government. It's just a problem that we're pushing, kicking down kicking the can down the road by constantly borrowing money and doing those things. All right, well, let's talk about a few other things then. Actually, it's I'll pose some questions for you guys just to see if I can solicit a little bit of debate. What does everybody feel? So one of the things that dominated the airwaves yesterday on X in particular was Pierre Poilievre going down to Texas, which was good, right? He had a trip. He went and talked to people in West Virginia, I believe, or some other place. And then they ended up in Texas talking to the governor of Texas about oil and stuff like that. And then he ended up on the Joe Rogan podcast. Joe's based out of Austin, Texas. And that seemed to me, I'm at this point, I mean, I'm pretty much disengaged from the federal politics. I'm focused on Alberta independence. I still keep an eye. Would I like Carney to be replaced by somebody like Poilievre? Absolutely. Do I think it's going to happen? Not in the near term. So I find the fact that that Pierre went down to Texas now to do this podcast, the timing is interesting. To be honest, I wanted him to do something like this last year during the campaign. I find that he was a little bit too nervous about doing it during the campaign. I got to be careful when I say this. I don't think Pierre, like a lot of politicians, actually makes his own decisions, right? Which is kind of alarming, right? You would think that the premier or the leader of a group or the prime minister would make his own decisions, just like I always expect the CEO of a company to make all the decisions. But I find that in political world, a lot of times leaders don't necessarily lead. They rely on too much on a team of advisors and campaign managers and PR managers and people like that. And they also rely on polls. And I don't like that. I mean, but that's politics. So I think last year a lot of people wanted Pierre to be more out there, more personable, get off the main script and go do podcasts, because we know that a lot of elections are won by winning over that middle ground people, and in this day and age, it's younger people who are watching social media, and so people wanted Pierre to go on podcast last year. He didn't do it. I think he didn't do it because he was poorly advised, but I also think he didn't do it because he was a little bit scared of being associated too closely with the Americans. And I think that was a misstep. That the fact that he's doing it now is interesting, but let me know your thoughts on that. But more interesting to me, I haven't seen the podcast. So the podcast is going to come out probably in full length in the coming days. I know they not leaked out, but I know they've released little bits of the podcast right now, little teasers. I haven't seen anything in the teasers that's too shocking or too revealing. I look forward to the full length podcasting, what that does. But what I'm more interested in is not our side's reaction to it, but I'm really interested in the left's reaction to it. If they have a complete meltdown, well, then that will have been a success. I hope that so I look forward to seeing that. If you guys have seen something and you want to mention it, let me know. Let me check a couple of comments here. John, do you see any comments worth highlighting right now? It's interesting because we can both move up on the thing at the same time. Marty, you make so much sense. Yeah, I do. How much taxpayer dollars are they spending on those surveillances? Yeah. I turned off my phone while I'm here because I don't want my phone ringing, but I did reach out to a couple of people, and I got some people driving by those vans to go see what's going on. Isn't it crazy though that I would feel that way in this day and age, that I'm simply a citizen with no access to the levers of power. I don't make policy, and I'm being spied on, and I don't think that's a coincidence, and I don't think I'm being that I'm exaggerating. I've had too many weird incidences in the last little while to attribute them just to coincidence. I think I am being surveilled. I'm sure if you ask people here, if I ask Corey or if I ask Derek and others here, they feel the same way. In fact, I know Corey feels the same way, and Corey's also one step further. People have threatened Corey. That's not cool. I mean, the crazy lady coming to yell at me, I'm okay with that. But it's when you go to that next step that I draw the line. All right, well, let's keep talking about a couple of things that are on my mind that made the news this week. Actually, let's talk about oil and Pierre's trip to the U.S. Again, oil is, everybody who's tried to ignore oil in the last 25 years, right? Whether it's the Liberals or the NDP, or Greta Thunberg, everybody who's tried to ignore oil. I never worried about people that were trying to ignore oil and tell me that oil was done, because I'm a pragmatic, and I know how much oil the world consumes. I mean, I've been sitting on the side of the road for the last 3 weeks collecting signatures, and I'm sitting literally on the side of the highway, and I see the cars going by all day. So I know how much oil the world consumes. And then you have an event like just happened in the Gulf. You got the U.S. attacking Iran, and Iran putting up more of a fight than I thought they would. And suddenly the Strait of Hormuz is shut down. John, do we have a quick picture of where the Strait of Hormuz is? If you get a chance, I think most people understand this, but let's put some context to this. About a third to 25% of the world's oil comes from those Gulf states where the war is occurring, right? So you got a Gulf there, and on one side is Iran and Iraq, and on the other side you got Saudi Arabia, and you got Kuwait, and you got Qatar, and there's so much. There's the picture there, right? So you got Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, Iran, all those countries, Kuwait, Iraq, they all produce oil, and the bulk of that oil there isn't shipped by pipelines. It's shipped by vessels that have to go through that Strait of Hormuz. And so the strait is just a narrow spot in the Persian Gulf. It's barely like 20 miles wide. So every boat has to go through there. And the Iranians on their side can reach all the boats that are trying to go through with missiles, and then they can mine the strait. Anyways, it's a mess over there. I think the Americans underestimated the willingness of the resilience of the Iranians and their willingness to keep on fighting. And not the Iranians, but the Iranian regime and the Iranian army. And so consequently, the strait is pretty much shut down right now, which is having a huge impact on the price of oil all around the world. I drove by the gas station here on the way by. It's $1.62 for gasoline in Alberta. It's $2 plus in BC. And the Americans are now complaining that they're going to hit whatever, $3, $4 a gallon. And so suddenly everybody that hated oil is back on board loving oil. And that's going to be like that for a long time. There's just no replacement for oil in a modern society like ours. Even other sources of energy like nuclear and whatnot, which produce huge quantities of nuclear, they're just not mobile. And so the energy we're interested in is the energy that literally goes into a vehicle and that allows you to drive around. So the fact that Joe, or not Joe, I keep saying Joe, I got to remember it's Pierre. The fact that Pierre chose to go down to Texas right now is not a coincidence. You know, the Americans, everybody's going to look to us now to provide oil and provide some relief in the short term, which was another interesting thing that I saw this week. So Carney and several of his ministers all went on interviews, and I laughed at all of the ones who talked about Carney specifically. I think used the word strategic reserves. So Carney said something like Canada's going to increase, you know, dump some oil from our strategic reserves into the world market to help ease the problem. We don't have any strategic reserves, folks. Like, there's no such thing. The Americans have some strategic reserves, but even theirs aren't that big. Closer to home here, Corey Hogan, who's the only Liberal MP in Calgary, was on the National talking to Rosemary Barton, and he said the same kind of things. You know, we're gonna in Corey's mind, there's this magic tap somewhere in Alberta where we just increase the tap and all of a sudden we start producing more oil. There's no such thing. There's no tap like that. If we want to increase more oil, we'd have to do it. But again, the bigger picture here is this week is that this just shows the failure of the Liberal policies of the last decade to anticipate this. To me, a government in power should be able to anticipate this. There should be no shock when there's a Gulf that gets shut down like this and the price of oil goes up and everybody wants our oil. There should be no shock at that, but a lot of people are suddenly acting as if that is a big revelation. All right, so come on, folks, give me so I'm going to go through a couple of comments here. Let's see what we got. Marty, don't waste your time on Pierre Poilievre. He and the federal Conservatives are just a boat anchor designed to keep Alberta tied forever to Confederation. Yeah, I mean, thank you for reminding me of that. I perhaps spoke about Pierre and Carney a little too much. I still talk about them, but like I said, I want to focus mostly on stuff that's here closer to home. But as much as I want to avoid talking about Ottawa, I still have to talk about Ottawa, unfortunately, until we separate. And even after we separate, I'm still going to talk about Ottawa. So on the topic of Ottawa, there was another big story this week that broke in Ottawa that I think is worth mentioning. And that's the fact that we all know what happened during the trucking convoy, right? So the trucking convoy occurred. There was protests in Ottawa. They went on for 3 weeks. And finally, after 3 weeks, Trudeau invoked the Emergency Measures Act. And then they managed to clear everybody out of Ottawa and Coutts and other places. Well, and that emergency measures enactment was challenged and deemed not once, but already twice. It was deemed by 2 different courts to have been that Trudeau acted incorrectly, illegally, whatever. There's all sorts of terminology around it, but he shouldn't have invoked the Emergency Measures Act. We all know that. He should have just come out and talked to the truckers and settled it properly, but his ego got the better of it. The thing went on forever, and then finally he enacted the Emergency Measures Act. And 2 courts have said that he did it wrongly. And now yesterday was the deadline for Ottawa to appeal the last decision. And they waited. And finally, yesterday, they decided that they were going to appeal the decision, which is normal. They wait until the last minute. So Ottawa is appealing the Emergency Measures Act decision all the way to the Supreme Court now. So now we're going to let the Supreme Court decide. And I'm okay with that. I mean, it is a waste of taxpayer dollars, but it is unfortunately the way our system works. And so I'm not surprised that this is happening. The courts will have to adjudicate and then we'll know once and for all if he was right or wrong. I'm still not comfortable. I'm still not confident that anybody will ever be held accountable. But the interesting part of this story is that the Supreme Court has 9 judges right now, and there's always 9. But one of them in particular, Justice Wagner, I can't remember Justice Wagner's first name, but Justice Wagner immediately, he was very vocal. So he was a judge during the protest, and he was on the record before even the Emergency Measures Act was enacted. He was on the record as saying that we should kick these guys out of there. We should throw the book at all of them. They're seditious. What they're doing is wrong. And so he was very biased. He made some very biased, ugly comments about the protesters. And now he's a Supreme Court judge. So he's the one who's going to have to rule on this. Do you think he's biased? I mean, by all definition, his comments passed the test. So there's already a lot of people asking that he recluse himself, that he step away from that court hearing, and because he's impartial. But he hasn't said anything yet. We haven't heard. I don't think, that's another problem with our confederation. I mean, the judges are appointed by Trudeau or the government, but in this case, mostly by Trudeau. Judges are appointed, senior bureaucrats are appointed, the presidents of crown corporations are appointed, senators are appointed. Like of all the people in senior roles in government and in the courts, 90% of them have been appointed by Trudeau. So is this guy going to do his job impartially? I don't think so, and that's one of the overall problems with Confederation, and one of the reasons so many of us in Alberta want to separate. So we'll see how that goes. All right, let's go through a couple of comments here. Derek, voice out your comment. Call the number. Oh no, that's Derek saying that. Yeah. Please, folks. Come on, folks. Like seriously, the number is down on the line there. 866-479. What does West spell out, John? I can't. I don't have a phone in front of me, but yeah, call that number, please. It's not long distance. Don't do like Linda did a couple of weeks ago. Don't feel like you have to build up the courage to call me. I'm just a guy. All right, I'm just going to throw a comment up here then. Don't blame the American for not wanting to do business with Canada. Who would like to do business with a tyrannical socialist regime that allows communist countries and sleeper cells in? Oof. Okay. Luckily, Americans do business with us, right? So I posted a tweet about that the other day because it's a common question, actually. That one of the fears that get brought up all the time about an independent Alberta is the fact that we will be landlocked. And by the way, Corey did a great video on this. Corey Morgan did a little video from his house the other day where he listed out his 5 concerns that he hears while he's been touring, doing his talk on independence. And so go watch Corey's video, and I will come back to that one. I will come back to, okay, I've already lost. I was going to trade with the U.S. Okay, trade with the U.S. I'll come back to it, but I've got a caller on the line. So go ahead, caller. Where are you calling from, and name, please?
Hey, Marty, it's Dwight from Calgary. How you doing?
Good, Dwight. Thanks for being brave.
Yeah, no problem. Listen, Chief Justice Wagner was Chief Justice of the Supreme Court when he made those comments about the trucker convoy. So it's probably worse than you thought. I don't have a lot of faith in the justice system of this country to treat those of us that want to get rid of the federal government very well. But anyway, my question or my comment is I talked to a lot of people. One of my first questions is, have you signed the petition yet? And I got some feedback that kind of shocked me and maybe shocks you a little bit. Maybe you got this comment somewhere, but they want to sign, but they're afraid. They're afraid that the government's going to get the list and use it against us at some point in the future. If we don't separate or whatever, that people that signed the petition are going to be,
targeted,
have something bad targeted. Yeah, exactly. Something like that. So, I didn't really have a good response to that other than that's exactly why you should sign.
Thanks, Dwight. So, stay on the line for a second, but that's a great response.
Sure.
I've actually had that question only about a handful of times. One lady came and would not sign. A Canadian lady would not sign, no matter how I tried to convince her that, the answer, the classic answer is, we collect, we're going to count, and as soon as we're done counting, they're destroyed and nobody's allowed to gather information from there. She wasn't satisfied. I tried to say, almost along the lines you went, I'm like, which government are you afraid of, right? And she's like, well, Ottawa, look at what they did to the truckers when they froze their bank accounts. And then I was like, precisely. So we're trying to separate from Ottawa, and Alberta wouldn't do the same thing. I couldn't win her over, but you know, 1 out of whatever 499 people. So it is a concern. Then I had, but I had it about 3 times from foreigners, people or newly landed immigrants, 2 from Brazil. I remember very clearly, and they said they would never do. They didn't want to sign. They came over to as a show of support, but they said, you know, back home in Brazil, if we signed this, we would be targeted. So yeah, there's no perfect answer. There's the technical one which says they're not allowed to do it, but you know, how many things are our governments not allowed to do that they still do? The non-technical answer is an independent Alberta would hopefully not do what Ottawa did. Yeah. Thanks, Dwight. Yeah. So so you've signed, are you a canvasser yourself or?
No, I'm not a canvasser, but I did sign. I signed actually over where you sit, but it was on a Thursday when you first started coming out Thursdays and you weren't there. So
cool.
But yeah, I signed. Yeah.
Appreciate that. Yeah. All right. Thanks for
calling.
Can't
wait.
Yeah.
Hopefully. Take care, Marty.
Yeah,
Bye-bye.
Yeah. Take care. I was going to go somewhere with Dwight's comments, but all right. Well, thanks, Dwight. So let me just go back to Corey's video, which is awesome, right? Corey identified 5 common fears. Canada or Alberta's landlocked, the treaties, the Canada pension plan, is it legal? And I can't remember the 4th or the 5th one, but I pretty much agree with Corey's assessment. I get the same questions, and I was in the process, you know, I was reading one of the comments who said that the Americans don't want to trade with us. Luckily, they want to trade with Alberta more than they want to trade with just about anybody, any other province, right? So we're in good terms with them because we mostly trade oil, and pragmatically speaking, it's the easiest, other than their own oil, the easiest oil they get is ours. So I don't think that relationship is at risk. And the short answer, this was really interesting because I looked into it. We do about Alberta does about $160 billion worth of trade with the US and does $70 billion worth of trade with other provinces. So in terms of being landlocked, right there, it's irrelevant. We're already landlocked, but our number 1 partner is actually not interprovincial. It is with the US. We do $160 billion worth of trade with the US, which is a huge number. Go ahead, caller, name and where are you calling from?
Hey, Marty, Jesse and GP again.
Hey, Jesse, regular on the
How's
show.
It going, dude?
Yeah, good.
I'll say. I want to just speak to something you mentioned early on in the show. I'm actually out on the Husky collecting signatures right now, so I'm at a low spot right now. So people need to remember, I think, that, and a lot of people don't, and hopefully you can repeat this as far and wide as you can, everyone, that the government employees do not contribute to the tax pool. Right? They're net negative on the tax pool.
100%.
Right, and that's where you had mentioned the resource industry is dwindling, and they're basically, you know, strangling us when it comes to oil and gas extraction. If we had an extra couple of pipelines, maybe we could get more. But if we have nowhere to put it, then why are we getting more, right? And if the regulations and the emissions charges and all the royalties, like it's not feasible for industry to extract any more oil and gas if it's not going to make them profitable.
Yeah.
Right. So yeah, I just wanted to make that note.
And I'll come back to that, but boy, am I glad you called because I had a weird incident on Sunday last week. So Sunday last week, and you hopefully you can answer this. Sunday last week, I'm sitting on the side of the road canvassing with my buddies, and I get a phone call, and it's unidentified. I don't normally answer an unidentified number, but I answered this one, and it was somebody who identified themselves as a chief firearm, or not a chief firearms officer, somebody who identified themselves as a firearm officer from Grand Prairie. So you guys had a Grand Prairie gun show on Sunday, and somebody tried to use a fake PAL with a number that coincided with mine. And so I got a phone call, and I confirmed that I wasn't trying to do a purchase, that I wasn't there, and everything else. And I called back, and the second time, an hour later, it was the same lady. And when I checked her out online, she does appear to have been a firearms officer. I asked her why she didn't cancel the PAL, and then she said that would have impacted me, and it's easier to just flag that individual as having attempted fraud. So I found that interesting. Is it correct in my understanding that she was attending a gun show, and that's regular for firearms officers to attend gun shows?
So I've never heard of a firearms officer attending a gun show, but now with the new laws and regulations, that could be it could be something that they want to do. But there was a gun show here, yeah, and I think it was put on by some of the other independent supporters.
Yeah,
that is very weird, Marty.
Jesse, I have so many weird events these days that I went to the RCMP 2 days ago and I filed a report. I literally said that somebody attempted to commit fraud using my PAL with as much information as I could provide. I put the lady's name down. Anyways, I'm at the point where I'm not taking chances anymore. Cool. Jesse, thanks for the call. And I will, if you don't mind, hang up, but I will address your second half of your comment, which is, or your first comment. What Jesse's referring to, people get upset when I say this, but it's a fact, right? When I say that a government employee is a non-contributing, is a financial net non-contributor, it's a fact. Sure, you contribute. If you work for the government and if you're a nurse, you're doing something useful. If you're a food inspector, you're doing something useful. That's great. A lot of people working for the government, as far as I'm concerned, are not doing very useful work. But even if you're doing useful work, you are not paying taxes in principle, because your salary is entirely funded by the government. And so let's say you're a nurse and you're paid $100,000 a year, and they say, well, I pay taxes. Okay, you pay $20,000 in taxes. That means that four other people have to work and pay $20,000 in taxes to cover the salary of the nurse. You see where this goes? And that's how bad it's getting, right? We need about 4 or 5 taxpayers paying a pretty hefty amount of taxes just to cover the cost of one public sector employee. And now that's another problem that's compounding, because we have too many public sector employees. Their salaries are getting out of hand. And then the ratio of private sector employees to public sector employees is like below 3. So for every 10 workers in the province, 7 work for one form of government, or 7 work in the private sector, 3 work in the government. That's not enough to cover the costs, and that's why we keep having to borrow money. And so people don't like hearing it, especially when they work in the public sector. They don't like hearing that they are not contributing to government. You're not contributing to government. You are, in that sense, contributing to society. Sure, if you have a good job that is useful, but it's just a reality. And then in some provinces, those ratios are over the top crazy. I mean, people don't like the Fraser Institute. They have all sorts of excuses. They'll say they're right leaning, but the Fraser Institute still does some pretty good data analysis. And they have lots of reports on that. And some provinces out east, like Nova Scotia, New Brunswick, and PEI, holy smokes, man. It's as if almost everybody in those provinces works for the government, and that's it. So, yeah, that's a real problem. Am I overreacting on the on all the incidents happening to me in the last little while? Hopefully I am. Actually, hopefully I am. But I don't think I am. All right, couple more things. Hey, John, can you, sorry to put you on the spot, but could you find the video of the train hitting the truck in Tabor? I don't know where you would find that. I was just going to go there, but while John searches for that, let's I got a couple of things. I had a lot of other things I wanted to talk about. Maybe we'll bring I'll mention them now, and then maybe they're food for thought for next week because they're very fresh. Yesterday, Danielle Smith did a press conference with Mickey Amory, where they're talking about Alberta is going to make it harder to qualify for MAID, or maybe not harder to qualify for MAID, but you're going to have to wait a little bit longer. Because remember last week I shared a statistics that was absolutely alarming, right? Something like it was a report for one city, I think it was Toronto, but something like 20 or 30% of requests for MAID in that one city, I think it was Toronto, were approved and carried out in the same day. Can you imagine that? Like, you just show up at the hospital and you go, hey, I want to commit suicide. And you show up at noon and by 5 o'clock it's done. I think that's, again, I'm a bit on the fence on MAID, not having experienced it myself, not having any family members that are suffering that much. So I find it a little bit hard to completely comment on that. But some parts of MAID, let me backstep. I think that a lot of policies to me should be studied carefully before they're implemented, and then they should be implemented slowly, and we should be monitoring for unintended consequences. Okay, so it could be anything. It could be giving drugs on the streets as a treatment. It could be MAID. It could be whatever, free daycare. I don't care. In my opinion, almost every policy, no matter how well intentioned, can have some unintended consequences or worse. And to me, MAID fits in that one, right? This government assisted suicide makes me nervous. So and I'll admit it, I'm on the fence. I haven't decided exactly where I stand on it, but I think it's one of those things where we should perhaps move a little bit more slowly instead of fast. And from what I understand, Danielle Edmonton passed a law yesterday, or is contemplating a law where it'll be more difficult to qualify for MAID, or you'll have to at least wait a little period. And so the idea being that if you're not in, even if you have a life-threatening disease, if you're not an immediate threat, if it's not going to end your life in the next, 48 hours, that perhaps you need to wait. So maybe comment on that next week, and we can see where you guys stand on that. I asked John, I don't know how I was going to roll this all into it, but I wanted John to, I don't know how many of you guys saw this video yesterday or 2 days ago. It was recorded in Tabor. Check this out.
Colonialist, imperialist. Holy shit!
Yeah. Okay.
Holy shit!
Full disclosure for YouTube and any other platforms, nobody was injured in that incident. It was recorded. Nobody was injured, but I saw that yesterday, and I think my reaction was along the same lines. Holy crap, right? And then a couple of people did some investigating and found out that truck was sitting on the road at the bad spot, waiting to make a turn, and suddenly got blindsided by that train. To me, getting hit by a train is probably one of the most ridiculous things in the world. I mean, they do move fast, but to me, it should be almost 100% avoidable. But I'm just going to relate a story that relates to me. I'm an engineer. I spent a lifetime solving problems, and one of the things I always did as an engineer is you try and take out the human factor out of your design, or you try and think, what's the stupidest thing some human's going to try and do, and then you try and engineer around that, right? So you have a certain you'll put a guard around a piece of equipment because you're worried that some human will put his hand in there and wreck his finger, so you put a guard, and then the guard's not enough. Anyways, long story short, I learned a long time ago that as much as I spend time designing things for dumb humans, there'll be there's always a human dumber than I anticipated. Not saying that guy was dumb, but a lot of the evidence points to the fact that truck really shouldn't have been there. And there's a lot of that was completely preventable. And the reason I'm bringing that up is we've had too many, again, this is related to this out of control immigration we've had. I'll be blunt. I think we have there's too many weeks that, that go by where there's an incident. There was one like that in Jasper not too long ago. They're all along the Coquihalla. They're everywhere. There's too many incidents of unqualified truck drivers and big trucks. And it's becoming an issue that's got to be addressed. And I think the out of control immigration is part of that. These guys are getting their permits. I don't know where they're getting their permits, but we never used to have that many incidents. And suddenly there's this whole peak of incidents like that. And something else led me to believe that, is it maybe perhaps even an insurance scam? I don't know. Anyways, I found that one quite interesting. All right, well, let me go through a couple of comments here, see what I got. All right. Good afternoon. Weirdly, 139. Good afternoon from Taber, Alberta, says. I don't know if it showed up on the screen there. Good afternoon from Taber, Debbie. Hey, Debbie, maybe a follow-up comment. Were you anywhere near that, or can you describe what happened there? Why? Because that truck was turning into a bean plant of some sort. Now, obviously, the truck looks empty by the way they got impacted. Yeah, maybe. Let me go. Oh, let's go to another one. Always like comments to see who's calling from as far as possible. We got somebody, Grace, here from down here in Arizona. I've seen and talked to all kinds of Albertan seniors who are signing at the pop-up places. Audit comes up every time that the federal government would punish us for signing, freeze bank accounts, take pensions, and so on. Imagine being that afraid. It's sad, but that is the fact that Canadians have a reason to be afraid of their government. Let me just put it that way. I mean, I'll be blunt. Our government hasn't been exactly nice to us in the last decade, and there's a reason to be that. I mean, getting a bank account frozen is completely debilitating in this day and age. A friend of mine, well, you guys all know her, Eva Chipiuk. Eva had an account frozen. I mean, what a scary thing to wake up to that. Andy Lee, that many of you guys know, Andy probably had the bank account frozen. It's something that's terribly difficult to recover from. Everything is so related. I mean, think of the inconvenience of just losing your wallet and losing your driver's license and your bank card and having to replace them. That's inconvenient, but at least it can happen. If the government freezes your bank account, you're hooped. And those are all. I mean, we're running out of time, but I'll leave it with this, right? Because I think it is a parting thought. Our government wants to control us. Like, there's no ifs, ands, or buts that our governments are constantly doing things to control us. They're doing things to control our speech. They want to go to digital currency because that just makes it easier to shut you off. They want us in electric cars. There's nothing easier than if you're driving an electric car and they can just turn off download some software and take control of your car. I mean, you're driving your car, you didn't make a payment, it's on its way back to the dealership. They don't want us in the parks. Oh, by the way, geez, I never even thought of that one. Jeff Evely out east is right now remember Jeff, he's the veteran who walked into the woods last year and got fined $28,000 in Nova Scotia. His case is on trial. Closer to home, we just learned last week that this summer we won't be able to do paddle sports in several lakes in Banff, Lake Minnewanka, Moraine Lake, and I think Bow Lake. So the government's controlling us, doesn't want us having fun, doesn't want us in the wilderness. Anyways, I'm ranting a little bit. I got one last chance for one last caller online. Go ahead, caller. Where are you calling from and what's on your mind?
Hey, good to see you or hear you. It's Tommy Temper from the Tommy Temper Show out of Edmonton. By the way, Edmonton is a pretty good place here. You know, I was born here, lived here all my life, and actually I live in Nenshi's territory here. So he's kind of a helicoptered in guy from Calgary, and of course he's not going to do us any good. But I'd like to give a shout out and a thanks to Western Standard for doing such a good job supporting the effort, and I'd like everyone to support the Western Standard, of course. Glad to see that you're on the show there. I kind of was following you on X and one of the other podcasters there, and really love the stuff that you do on X. I push it out all the time, share it out and stuff like that. My background is I went on the convoy to Ottawa, was at Milk River, and I'm a big supporter of independence. And I love what's going on here with the whole thing. I have a question for you though.
Okay.
What's your take, and give us a little bit more of an indication of what's happening with the petition and how the natives got together, and they're going to use the court system to try and thwart the petition and the whole thing. And what do you think this court system thing is going to happen? And you guys are supposedly putting the votes in for the plebiscite early because you think that they're going to try and thwart it with the court system. So what's going on with that whole thing?
Okay. Well, thanks for calling, Tommy, and appreciate your support all these last few years. Listen, I'm not, I think people perceive me as an insider to the APP, but I'm not, right? I'm a very vocal proponent of independence, but I don't sit on the board of APP or Stay Free Alberta. I don't have, direct access to what they're thinking. I only hear it like you and I. So to the original question of whether or how the First Nations are trying to slow this down, they're simply requesting an injunction. They're literally requesting a pause to the signature collection. I haven't read their brief. I don't know what their basis of their injunction is, other than I'm sure they're claiming it's unconstitutional. It has something to do with ceded territories and so forth and so forth. My opinion on that is that I can't see how they would have a leg to stand on, because the petition at this point is done under the Citizens Initiative Act. So that's how it's being managed. And all we're doing is collecting signatures. We're petitioning the government. So I don't know why they, trying to stop citizens from collecting signatures seems an extreme abuse of a democratic right. It's almost like trying to stop me from voting. So I have no idea how the court will adjudicate on this. It's up in April, coming up here, April 6th or 7th. My fear is that a lot of judges don't want to adjudicate, and they'll just accept the request, impose an injunction and stop the process, and then let an appellate court or another court decide. So honestly, I don't know how they can do it. And even if even I find that funny, like even if they said, okay, you can't do Stay Free Alberta, you can't collect signatures. I could, at that point, I could literally take my badge and throw it in the garbage and say, you know what, I'm still going to collect signatures. I'm going to stop. I'm going to stay on the side of the road and collect signatures. And what's going to happen then? Is the court going to send an officer to put me in contempt of court? You know what I mean? Like this is going to be interesting, because I don't know how this plays out, and I don't know how an injunction would even be enforceable. That said, I've heard the same rumor that you've heard, which is that Stay Free Alberta, or Mitch Sylvester as the petitioner, is potentially thinking of not letting this to even go to trial, to go to court. The hearing is on April 6th. So Mitch could, if he feels that let's say Mitch has 500,000 signatures in his office right now, and it's March 31st, should he take all 500,000 and say, yeah, we're done, and then submit him to Elections Alberta before this can even go to court? I would agree. I would say, yeah, absolutely do that. So we'll see. That it's strategic at this point, but I'm not a true insider. Hope that answers the question there, Tommy. Thanks for calling in. Oh, he must.
Okay, real good.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Okay, cool. Thanks.
Yeah, I appreciate the answer. Yeah. No, I would have to agree with you, because that's what we're hearing, is that you're wanting to put the petitions in ahead of time before the deadline. Everyone is saying, hey, get out there, sign now, which I would agree, sign now in case that does happen. We know that the petition itself was thwarted with the court system ahead of time, right? There was a big delay on it, and the legislation was changed to prevent that from happening. But it seems like the court system should getting involved again, which of course we don't trust those liberal judges. Okay,
No,
thanks a lot, Marty.
yeah,
Appreciate it.
thanks for, and I'll just follow up. I think that's, I called it a stunt when I saw them, the chiefs with Nenchi on the steps of the legislature, and I think that stunt backfired on them because we had a boost of, I can only speak from personal experience, but last week and the week before, I had a huge boost in people coming to sign and citing that example specifically. So perhaps that backfired on him. Listen, Tommy did a pretty good sales pitch for us here at the Western Standard, but I'll repeat it. I mean, the show's coming to an end here. Join me again next week, folks. We'll keep doing this, and I'll keep bugging you guys to call in. I'll keep refining the whole system. I mean, either call in or send me comments beforehand. You know how to reach me. You can reach me here. You can reach me on X. Put your comments on there. And don't be shy. We'll get this going. If you're not already a member, it's $10 a month or it's $100 a year. So again, organizations, independent media like this, depend on collecting fees from the public like you guys, unlike CBC that gets theirs from taxpayers. You would do this voluntarily. So consider joining. It's www.westernstandard.news. And hopefully you'll join me again next week here Thursdays at 1 p.m. for the Marty Up North show on the Western Standard. Cheers, folks.